Welcome to NarrativeNook audio tales where enchanted stories come to life. If you enjoy our stories, please subscribe, like and share to support our channel. Enjoy listening.
If you fail that one, you might as well forget about the rest of the assessment, Inara pointed out sardonically. She was never one to hold back on her candor, though it would help if she didn't have such a sharp tongue. If I were you, I'd pack up and go home right now, before I embarrass myself any further. Can't you just shut up for 2 seconds, Inara? Caspian snapped, frowning. Why? Are we all treading on eggshells around Ruka now? You know I'm right, Inara argued, then scoffed as she dragged Michelle out the door with her. Caspian heaved a long sigh after those girls left, and he addressed Ruka curiously. I don't know why you failed when you worked twice as hard as everyone else. Could something have gone wrong along the way? Ruka pursed her lips and forced out a smile as she said, just bad luck, I guess. In truth, she was a little bitter over this. She had done all her research and submitted all relevant materials for the assessment, confident that she would pass. It was lunchtime at the cafeteria when Ruka turned into the hallway, only to accidentally bump into someone. She looked up to see that it was none other than Victoria, who shot her a cold glare before brushing past her. Miss Parfait, a word please? Ruka spoke up boldly. As though knowing what this would lead to, Victoria arched her brow and said, I know what you want to talk about, but any opinions you might have will not change anything. With this, she had as good as told Ruka that she could slave her days and nights away to make up for the failing grade and it would not change a thing, because there was no way she would ever let her pass the assessment. She's holding me back on purpose. Miss Parfait, I was only hoping that you might drop this unfair treatment toward me, Ruka pointed out calmly. Don't be so pretentious, Ruka. You want to talk about fair treatment? Fine. How about you share that sentiment with Ren? He was the one who pulled strings to get you into the translation department, no questions asked, Victoria sneered. Ruka froze. There was no hiding Victoria's hostility now. I'd get out of the department now if I were you. Wouldn't want to end up in another humiliating situation. There was a jealous gleam in Victoria's eyes as she gave Ruka a freezing look before storming away. After that, Ruka made her way back to the office absent-mindedly. She never thought she would run into such troubles here at the workplace, and while she would love to stay in the translation department, she knew that she did not stand a chance for progress if Victoria continued being petty like this. Upon returning to her desk, Ruka watched as everyone around her got the notice for the second assessment while her inbox remained empty. There was no better proof of unfair treatment than that. Ruka exhaled slowly. She had made up her mind, and even though she really wanted to stay in the translation department, she knew that she had to earn herself a place by taking the entry assessment the next time the department was hiring. Victoria would never let the matter of her getting in through connections rest otherwise. More importantly, her decision to quit the internship was to keep anyone from accusing Ren of abusing his power. Caspian noticed Ruka packing up her things and asked anxiously, What are you doing? Ruka? She smiled and said, I hope you'll make your mark here, Caspian. I have to leave because of, well, personal reasons. Will we see each other again? He pressed, standing up. He had every intention to pursue her romantically, and he didn't want to miss out on her. I guess that's up to fate, huh? Ruka flashed him a grin, then waved goodbye to everyone as she said, Bye, everyone. Inara and Michelle looked decidedly cheerful to see that she was leaving, and their tones were considerably warmer as they sang, Goodbye. Ruka slung her bag over her shoulder and made her way over to Victoria's office. She knocked on her door and heard Victoria say, Come in. Ruka did just that, and when Victoria saw her standing there with her bag, she immediately realized what was going on. Leaving already? She asked, raising a brow. That's right, Ruka answered unaffectedly, but her tone was firm. But I'll try my luck to get in next year if the opportunity presents itself. Victoria smirked. I'm going to be frank with you, Ruka. For as long as I'm here, you'll never get into the translation department. Instead of getting angry, Ruka merely said patiently, You know, Miss Parfait, I'm going to leave you some sage advice before I walk out of here. Stop wasting your youth by trying to force someone to love you, because that will never happen. A dark look passed over Victoria's face as she seethed. What gives you the right to tell me that, Ruka? As I said, it was only sage advice, and it's up to you whether to take it or not, Ruka answered calmly, then spun on her heels to leave. Victoria stood up as anguish washed over her. She had found sweet revenge in picking on Ruka the way she had, but the rush was short-lived, and she still could not have written to herself. At the end of the day, Ruka might have left, but Victoria felt like the biggest loser. Meanwhile, Ruka headed down the sidewalk while gripping onto Lyre bag. She had left her job, but it was as if a huge weight had been lifted off her shoulders. As she walked, she decided that she was going to call Ren and tell him about this. She fished her phone out of her bag and found her way to the park, then sat on a bench as she called his number. His husky, magnetic voice filled the other line immediately after he picked up. Hello? Are you busy? Ruka asked. No, I'm on my way back to the house. I have something to tell you, she said openly. I quit my job. Why did you do that? Then, he asked icily, did someone make you? While Ruka was technically forced into quitting, she did not want him to pick on Victoria over this, so she chose to evade his question instead by saying, I decided to quit all on my own. Where are you now? Walking around the park. I'll go back to my parents' place in a while, she replied. I will have someone pick you up. And where will I be going? To see me. She wanted to see him badly as well, so she nodded and said, okay then. I'll send you my location. 20 minutes later, she slid into the back seat of the car Ren had sent for her. Soon, the car drove out of the bustling cityscape and into a well-guarded area. Ruka saw Ren immediately when she arrived at a tea house. He was sitting at an ornate table that looked like it dated back to the olden days, making him look like a prince or a king as he went through his documents. Next to him, Elijah was helping him sort out the paperwork. When he registered Ruka's arrival, he smiled and greeted politely, Miss Singed, have a seat. Ruka's heart careened from beat to beat when she saw how imposing Ren looked as he worked. She then took the seat next to him. Just as Elijah rose to leave and accord them some privacy, Ron glanced up and said, do as I say. Yes, sir, I'm right on it, Elijah replied while giving Ruka a meaningful look before closing the door behind him when he left the drawing room. Ruka looked around the ornately decorated place and asked curiously, is this one of your workplaces as well? Ron gave her a sympathetic look and handed her a cup of tea. Here, have some tea to warm yourself up. But I'm not cold, she paused mid-explanation when he grabbed her hands, which were freezing. At that moment, he had caught her lying. She flushed but did not try to pull her hands out of the warm cusp of his. A beat or two later, Ren drawled grimly. I'll give Victoria a stern warning. You can go back to the translation department anytime you want. Shaking her head, Ruka said, I don't want to go back. I want to try out other departments. I'm thinking of public relations, so I can work with my parents. It was not as if she had taken up the internship at the translation department without a backup, and she thought public relations was not too shabby of a choice. However, Ren's eyes darkened when he heard this. I'm afraid I can't let you. She blinked. Why? I don't want you any further away from me than necessary, he bit out in an almost demanding manner. She gazed into his depthless eyes and felt her heart melt. There was something about him that made her want to give up everything, including her good sense, just for him. He only needed to ask and she would have said yes regardless of what his request might be. That was how Ruka ended up saying, okay. I guess I'll consider something else then. You don't have to work, you know, he said hoarsely. I make more than enough for the both of us. She blushed at his sentimental tone, but she stood her ground and gave a firm shake of her head as she said, No, I can't just have you bankroll me. I want to make something of myself, I don't want to stay idle. A small smile curled on his lips as he asked teasingly. Is it that embarrassing to be a housewife? It's not embarrassing. Ruka countered in a flustered manner. I just want to accomplish something and have a career of my own, you know? I don't want to be one of those ladies of leisure. Ren's brows furrowed at this and he scolded, You'll still be precious to me no matter what you become. She felt her heart somersault happily in her chest, but her mind scrambled to veer away from this topic of her becoming a lady of leisure. She cleared her throat and said evasively, What did you ask Elijah to do? Is it something personal? He was tight-lipped about it as he answered, You could say that. Feeling awkward, she took a sip of the tea he had given her earlier and pursed her lips, then asked, What do you want for your birthday? Let me know so I can get it ready in time. Ron tapped his knuckles against her forehead and said huffily, Where's the meaning in that? You'll have to figure out what I want all by yourself, but you have everything you could possibly need, and you only use the best. Come on, help a girl out, she argued, pouting. She just wanted him to point her in the right direction so that she would not mess up his guilt. I don't have everything I need, he said devilishly as he fixed his dark, hungry gaze on her. I still need a woman. To think, she had just steered the conversation away from romance, only to be roped back into yet another heart-racing situation. She had to give it to him. Who would have thought that underneath the affable but stern vice president exterior hid a smooth talker? Ruka pursed her lips to keep from laughing, but she flushed as she pointed out, You can have any woman you want. Just say the word and any girl would throw herself at you. Ron brought his cup to his lips and drank his tea, then muttered, And yet, you still haven't. She gaped at him. I guess I should have seen that coming, she thought carefully. In another attempt to change the subject, she said brightly, I wonder when Aunt Scarlett and Uncle Walter are coming back. I do miss them. Ren read Ruka's mind and said with a deep smile, They will be back in about 2 days. Ruka nodded, and her phone rang at that moment. She picked up her phone and glanced at it. Then, she said, It's my mom. He motioned for the woman next to him to answer the phone while urging her, Answer it. She answered the phone quickly and greeted, Hey, Mom. Ruka, what time do you get off work? I'm having a get-together dinner with some old friends. You should come and meet them as well. She agreed, Okay. I'll be home before 5:00 p.m. Dress up nicely tonight. Mom, why do I need to dress up? Ruka questioned. The question drew the man's attention, and he cast a sidelong glance at her. Claire stressed in a serious tone on the other end of the line, Just do as I say and don't embarrass us, all right? Ruka smiled as she pursed her lips, All right. I got it. Ruka raised her head and looked the man in the eyes after she hung up the phone. Ren locked his gaze on her, and his expression was unfathomable. She thought she had made a fool of herself as she ran her fingers through her hair and asked, Why do you keep staring at me? Is there something on my face? What would you do if your parents set you up on a blind date? He asked her directly. Ruka was startled for a moment before she recalled her mom's advice about dressing up. Then, she responded with hindsight, No way. Are my parents going to arrange a blind date for me tonight? Ren asked her coldly, Are you looking forward to it? She erupted in laughter. No. Are you already jealous before I've met another man? When he reached out to take her hand, he immediately noticed the missing diamond ring on her finger. He asked with a frown, Where's the diamond ring? Oh, I left it at home, I'm afraid I'll lose it. As soon as she replied, she felt guilty and lowered her head. Ruka was worried about losing the diamond ring? Nah, obviously, she was terrified that someone would notice she was wearing a couple's ring with him. Put the ring back on when you get home. If you lose it, we'll get a new one, the man demanded. Ruka had no choice but to nod her head. All right. I'll put it on when I get home. The way Ruka responded caused Ren's facial expression to soften subtly. However, he did not release her hand and instead grasped it in his palm. Her heart skipped a beat when he grabbed her hand. She experienced a rapid heartbeat and flushed cheeks. In addition, she felt sparks fly from his gesture. From now on, say goodnight to me before going to bed every night. Did you know that I was waiting for your call last night? Ron asked in a low voice. He could not fall asleep because she was not at his home. She was left speechless as she pondered, does he really wait for my message? She did not send him a message because she did not intend to bother him late at night. Okay, I'll say goodnight to you before I go to bed. Ruka nodded. Providing he does not find my message bothersome. I'm going to get some work done now. You can rest by my side while I complete my work. Ren did not want to let her go, so he kept her close to him. Anyway, Ruka was delighted to accompany him. She grabbed a book to read when she noticed a small bookshelf in a corner. Meanwhile, Victoria was in her office and having a bad day. She thought that when Ruka left, she would feel better, but it seemed that Ruka's sudden departure made her feel even more upset. At that moment, there was a knock on the door, and she snapped, "Who is it?" "Miss Parfait, Elijah is here," the assistant said in a meticulous tone as she pushed open the door. Victoria tensed up and took a deep breath. She said with a smile, "Please invite him inside." When Elijah entered the room, she could not contain her excitement. "What brings you here, Elijah?" He looked at her calmly and said, "Miss Parfait, I'm here to relay a few words from Mr. Hassan to you." "What does he say?" Victoria worriedly inquired. "Does he know that I'm the one who made Ruka leave?" "Miss Parfait, Mr. Hassan would like to inform you that if you want your dad to retire comfortably and enjoy his golden years, you'd better be careful and stop abusing your power to bully others," Elijah said in a calm voice that belied the underlying threat in his words. Victoria's expression changed. "What is he going to do to my dad?" "The point is what you did to Miss Singed. Miss Parfait, you're a wise woman. You have to understand how important Miss Singed is to Mr. Hassan. Who the hell is Ruka? Is Ren blind? Which part of me is inferior to hers?" There was an intense resentment in her eyes. Elijah noticed the malice on her face and the hatred in her eyes. He replied indifferently, "I believe Miss Singed is much better than you in terms of being kind and open-minded." Victoria took a deep breath, and her face turned pale. She raised her head to look at Elijah and questioned, "Is he threatening me? Why is he doing this? You've crossed a line that's very important to Mr. Hassan, and Miss Singed is that line. Miss Parfait, you'd better keep an eye on yourself. You should have known better about Mr. Hassan's character. After giving you a warning, he will act on it. He clearly has leverage over your father after all these years. As long as he issues orders, your father will be unable to escape. In terms of your position, he can easily remove you from it if he desires." Elijah's last words were clear and cold. Victoria slumped back in her seat as Elijah turned around and left. "Does Ren have to treat me with such hostility because of Ruka?" She suddenly came to her senses at this moment. What kind of person have I fallen in love with? When Docs Ren becomes so cold and inhuman after a disagreement with me? My feelings for him over the years we have been in vain. Victoria's tears streamed down her cheeks, and she buried her sorrow by covering her face. At that moment, she could not wait to cast a curse on Ruka so that she would vanish or leave this world. Then, Ran would never get the woman he loved and suffered as much as she did. Ruka sat in a room heated by a radiator while reading a book. Since she had trouble sleeping the night before, The warmth caused her to feel drowsy. She had briefly sat before shifting to a prone position to read. Her eyes fought to stay open as she dozed off gently on her arm, but she managed to steal a peek at the man who was reading the documents. After Rin signed a document, he looked up and saw her sleeping on her stomach on the couch. He felt something tug at his heartstrings. This scene appears to be familiar. A similar sight happened many years ago. While he worked on quiz questions at the desk, a young child who was tired from playing fell asleep on the couch while holding her book. Her cute little face was tender, and her long eyelashes were unbelievably attractive. The young child slept as peacefully and beautifully as Ruka did at the moment. One could not resist showering her with love and care. Ron stood up and strode to the clothes rack, picked up one of his trench coats and walked to the couch. Then, he gently draped it over Ruka's body. He could not help but stoop and gently peck her on the forehead. Elijah returned 10 minutes later. When he opened the door, the man at the table motioned for him to keep quiet. He glanced over at the girl falling asleep on the couch before he left the room. Ruka was sleeping soundly at the moment, which drove the man who read the document to lose his mind. His gaze returned to her face, and his mind began to waver. The hours ticked by slowly until it was almost 5 p.m. when Ren felt a vibration from his phone. When he looked down to check the caller ID, he picked up the phone and went outside to answer the call. "Hey, Mom," Ren answered gently. "Ron, can you come home tonight for dinner? I'm already missing you." "Sure. I'll be back." "Okay. I'll ask Janet to cook your favorite dishes," Mrs. Hassan exclaimed happily. Ron pushed open the door to the lounge after he hung up the phone. All of a sudden, Ruka woke up. She blinked her sleepy eyes and asked the man who entered, "What time is it, Mr. Ren? Why did I doze off?" As soon as she finished her sentence, she became aware of the slight dampness at the corner of her lips and quickly covered it in embarrassment. Did she drool while sleeping on her stomach just now? Ren was used to her cute gestures and was not bothered by them. That was because Ruka had been like this since she was a child. It was 5:30 p.m. when Ruka pulled her phone out of her purse. She gasped at the moment and said, "I should go." "I'll leave you," Ron offered. "Okay. Elijah can do it," she rejected him and shook her head. The thought that he would leave her at home intimidated her. He did not argue with her and instead reached out to caress her face, where a red mark from her nap was still visible. Ruka allowed him to caress his face as much as he wanted. She wrapped her arms around his waist and stroked his chest in a bold motion. However, she was still dazed by sleep and wished for nothing more than to sleep a little more in his arms. He gently stroked her hair and muttered, "Scarlett will be home in 2 days. You and your parents should stop by for family dinner." Ruka stiffened upon hearing this. His recent nightmare flashed before his eyes and sent a chill down his spine. She hugged him tightly and confessed, "I'm a little worried." "Why?" "I'll be there," Ren assured her as he looked at her. He didn't dare to tell her about a nightmare he had in which he was lectured and scolded in front of everyone because of her. "Do I really have to?" she asked faintly, and looked at him in mute despair. He nodded. "I hope to have you and your parents as my guests." Ruka sighed. It seems that some things are simply inevitable, he thought with resignation. Secretly, he promised to take full blame for any mishap. "Please don't let Rin take the blame for me." "Okay," she promised. After that, Elijah took her home and Ron returned to his own place for dinner.
Thank you for listening. If you have enjoyed this story, please like and share so others can see it too. Also hit the subscription button and notification bell so you can be notified on our next release. Thank you for your support. God bless you.